Sorry about the little delay here.
That's all right. You'll get a bill for my time.
Okay. So anyway, we are on webinar WX Live Webinar 113, and today is Friday, May 16th, and Uncle Pete is back with a cool topic. Writing a URL shortener with WebDev? Is that right? Is that
That's
possible?
right.
All right. So anyway, I'm excited about this because I want to use this. So no further ado, go ahead, man.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Now, this is one of those kind of out of the box kind of presentations. We're actually going to see very little WinDev code today because or WebDev code. It just doesn't take a lot of code to accomplish this. This is once I got in and started researching this, it was fairly easy to do, but the concepts behind it are very interesting. So anyway, a little background. Teamology is something that me and a partner own. This is our current brass ring project that's going to, get me that 60-foot yacht one day. Or that's the idea anyway. We're in private beta now. Fabrice has been beating me up on this one marketing page that I threw up a couple of months ago as a placeholder. He's already found a couple of spelling mistakes and so forth on it, but we're in private beta right now. We haven't done the marketing side. We've basically been developing the technology. And what we do is data analytics for team member and customer engagement, which at the end of the day is really all about surveying your team members and customers and then taking the information from those surveys and analyzing it and presenting it. Most of you have seen some of the screenshots of all the dashboards and graphs and so forth that we're doing. And part of the whole process is we send email survey requests to team members and customers. And those emails look something like, let me get one up here for you. Here's a rather simple one. Actually, this has already got the short code in it, though. See if I've got one that has the original long code in it. These are all right. I don't have any of the long code ones, but anyway, we used to send these out, but this, instead of just having Teamology/8LO, it would have a link more like that. Can't even see it on that. I'll have to open up Notepad so you can see the thing. That was the link that we used to put in the emails, which is basically our survey page and then passing in a hash-generated survey request ID so that every survey had a unique ID, which in an email is fine because, they're clicking on a link. Wasn't really an issue. The customer in Saudi Arabia that we're working with over there, it appears that they actually do more communication via SMS than they do email. And this is nearly 80 characters. I think it's like 74 characters. Well, an SMS is 160 characters. So using 80 of them for the survey link seemed a bit excessive. So we had to come up with, some way to shorten up the survey. And of course, I could have had just a survey ID instead of this long code. But one of our issues with that is that's much too easy for someone to hink with changing the ID and different things, and it'd still be fairly long. So I started looking at URL shortener services, bit.ly, tinyurl. Google has one called goo.gl. So I started researching some URL shorteners, deciding which one we wanted to use. But they had some issues that I didn't like about them. And then as I started researching the topic, I found out that the technology and concept behind URL shorteners is a very simple concept. So I wound up writing my own in an afternoon, and now we're using our own instead of someone else's, which lets us keep the branding to ourselves, which is definitely a nice thing, and let me do some other custom things with it. So what you're seeing here, I'm not using it as a traditional URL shortener of put in any random URL and it takes you there. I'm using it as a shortcut to get to my particular survey request. But the concepts of what I'm going to show you today, you could definitely take this and create a URL shortener service very easily. So, like I said, if you were expecting to get to see some highly technical WX coding today, you're going to be disappointed. Once we get into the code, you're going to see that it's a very, very simple code. It just took a little research and a little understanding of math to accomplish it. So, there's companies, tinyurl was basically the first commercial enterprise that had a URL shortener service. bit.ly came along and kind of knocked them off that post and took over, and they're kind of the 800-pound gorilla today. But once you see the technology that is behind their service, it makes you wonder how in the world they built not only a company but an entire industry on a concept that is 50 lines of WX code and took an afternoon to get working. It says either someone there is very smart or I'm very dumb, because they built a business around something I did in an afternoon. So the secret behind a URL shortener and what makes this whole thing work is changing a number from one base to another. We all live in base 10. Our numbers are in base 10. Well, if you change to a higher base 36, base 62, you can cram more numbers into a smaller number of characters. And that's the concept behind a URL shortener, is by changing that base. So let's say we're going to create a URL shortening service. Uncle Pete's super cool URL shortener service.com. Great domain name. I think it's going to be the, knock bit.ly right off of their stool. So let's say we launch it. It's already real popular. So you come to the site and you use it. You want to take a long URL to your blog post and get a short URL back. What happens is when you register that long URL, all you do is that gets written into a database that has the long URL and then an auto-incremented primary key ID. So let's say this is a 17,230th record added to that database. So our ID is 17,230. We all understand database concepts. We know that if I give you the ID 17230, you can go pull that record out of the database and have the long URL for that ID. So now the only trick to all this is, okay, I don't want to send 17230. I want to send a short code. And the problem with, just sending the ID, like I said, you've got the issue of, that's very easy and obvious for somebody to say, okay, I wonder what happens if I do 17231. But you also have, when you get up to 1,000,000 records, now you've got 9 digits being used. So you change it to a different base. So 17230 takes, 5 characters if we do it in base 10, 17230. But most URL shorteners, what they do is they use base 62. And what base 62 is the 10 digits plus all lowercase letters plus all uppercase letters. So basically everything except for symbols. So that's 62 characters. You got 26 lowercase characters, 26 uppercase characters, 10 digits. So by doing that, by converting 17230 to base 62, it becomes 4 capital T small u. That is 17230 converted to base 62. So now you've got a nice, simple, easy to remember 3-character code that you can turn that back into 17230, go request your record, get the long URL, and redirect to that long URL. That's the concept behind a URL shortener. So at the end of the day, all they're doing is numeric base conversion, converting a file ID to a base 62 number, and then sending that instead of sending the long URL.
So, Pete, so your unique identifier has to be an integer. Then it can't be like a GUID. That's what it's all about, right?
Right. Yeah. There's no need. Basically, you're creating your own GUID because you're converting it to a different base. So you're basically creating a GUID. But yeah, you would use a integer as your unique ID.
Do you save both in your database, or you always just convert it on the fly?
I convert it on the fly. In other words, you're talking about the 4TU.
Yeah.
That's not stored in my database at all. And that's what, when we look at the code today, I've got an encode and a decode function that takes 17230 and gives me 4TU, and takes 4TU and gives me 17230. So I've just got 2 functions to flip it back and forth.
Okay.
Now we still store the long code because for certain things, a long code looks better. If I'm printing a survey on a receipt or something like that, you want a long code that looks more official, something like that.
More security.
Yeah. So we use long codes and short codes depending on exactly what we're working with. So the first issue that I had, and when I was researching Bitly, goo.gl, they mostly all use base 62. The problem with base 62 for me is it's uppercase and lowercase. 4TU and 4TU, those are 2 very different codes. It's case sensitive. Well, this whole purpose that we're doing here was to give you a code in an SMS that you could then go type into your computer or whatever and take the survey. Well, that would be a nightmare, having a case sensitive code that, someone's going to screw up the case on one letter and get a completely different survey or whatever. So base 62 really isn't a good option for us. Well, when you do a little more research, you'll find out there are some services out there, and they're kind of more customized services, read paid services, that they'll do base 36. Base 36 is the 10 digits plus all uppercase letters. So you don't have case issues, whether they give you a lowercase or an uppercase letter, you convert it to uppercase. So now 4T under, small u and 4T big U are both really 4T big U. So, so that's base 36. So that was the first thing that I learned in this was base 62, which is what most URL shorteners are based on, really wasn't for me because I didn't want to deal with case sensitivity. So that was the first thing I learned. Now, as I got into it a little further, what you'll see when we actually get into my code is I actually created my own base. I call it base 33, and we'll get into the reason I did that when we look at the code. So now let's talk about, you're thinking that, how big of a deal is this converting to base 62? Okay, let's say that you're only going to use 5 characters for your short code. That's not going to give you enough space. To find out how many characters that allows, you take 62 times 62 times 62. Just a second, guys. Times 62 times 62 for 5 characters. And if you can't do that math in your head, that's 916,132,832. So you could have 916 million records with a 5-character base 62 code. Now, most of the URL shortener services actually do 10 characters. So you can imagine how exponentially larger that gets, because if you take 916, 132, 832, and you just add a 6th character to it, you're now up to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 56 million. I'm sorry, 56 billion, just by adding 6 characters. So the key and what makes all this magic work is because you're changing to a different base. With each character you add to your shortcode, it becomes exponentially a larger group of numbers that you can represent in a shorter number of characters. So that's kind of the background behind it. And don't by any means think that I'm some kind of wizard that took a mathematics and statistics class to figure this out. Google and Wikipedia are your friend. Once I started researching URL shorteners, I very quickly bumped into articles that kind of explained what they do and gave me this. So let's go through the exercise of converting a number, because that'll really help you understand what we're doing here. So we start with our base 62, which that is base 62. You got the 10 digits, and then all uppercase, and then all lowercase. So that's base 62. Now, there's no standard base 62. So you'll find some of the engines are using lowercase and then uppercase. Some of the engines are using uppercase and lowercase. Doesn't matter, as long as their encode and decode both use the same formula, they're fine. It just makes it hard for you to translate their code. So how do we convert 17230 to 4T lowercase u. What you do is you take 17,230 and divide that by 62, which is our base. That gives you 277 with a remainder of 56. So then we take 56, we add 1 to it to allow for 0, and we look for the 57th character in our base. And the 57th character in our base is the lowercase u. So then we take the 277 that we had in the integer part of our first formula. We divide that by 62. That gives us 4 with a remainder of 29. We find out what is the, once again, we add 1 to it to allow for 0. So that gives us 30. So we find out what is our 30th character. And our 30th character is a capital T. And that gives us, all we have left is 4. 4 is not divisible by 62. So we're done with our math. Again, we add 1 to it, which is 5, and our 5th character is 4. And then we just put it together backwards. So we do 4TU. And that is exactly the encoding logic of converting a number from one base to another base. Is you just divide it by that base until you come down. Yeah. Somebody really smart figured that out. Trust me, it wasn't me. All I did was figure out how to do what they were explaining to me, and that was a challenge because, the guys that are smart enough to figure out how to do this kind of math aren't very good at, speaking English. So it took a little bit to understand how they were actually telling me to do the formula. So now
your English training helped you do this then.
Yeah, no, this was math to English. So now you have to do the backwards conversion. That's our encoding formula. So now we need the decoding formula, which is actually even a little easier. We start out with our first pass. We get this first number, which is 4. We look for what is the position in our base of 4, and it's actually it's the 5th position. But remember how we added 1 to allow for 0? We got to subtract 1 to allow for 0. So that gives us 4. Okay, so that's our first pass. Now our second pass, we take our second character, find its position, which was
Pete,
30.
Pete,
Yes.
Pete, that confuses me. Okay, you're saying 4, so I start at 0, 1, 2, 3.
No, you're looking for the character 4.
Oh, you look for character 4 in there.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, remember, because
and
you'll see in just a second, because now we've got T, what position is T?
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Right, so 4 was in the 5th position, so 5 minus 1 gives us 4.
Okay.
So now we have 4. Now we take our capital T, that's the 30th position, minus 1 is 29. So now we take 4 times 62 plus 29. That equals 277. Now our final pass, we take our small u. Our small u translates to 57. It's the 57th position in our base. Subtract 1 gives us 56. So now we take 277 times 62 plus 56 equals 17,230. And that's our decode logic.
Can you make that big? I want to look at this whole thing.
Yeah,
No, not the letters, just the screen.
What do you mean? Oh,
so I can see.
Oh, I got you.
Okay.
And when we look at the actual code, it'll be a little easier to see. And the blog post I'm going to post, I spell this out in greater detail, so you'll be able to really dissect it and figure it out.
Okay.
So now you've seen the concept behind encoding and decoding. Really, all we're doing is base conversion. We're almost ready to look at the WX code. One more concept to talk about before we get there. Remember, I said I wound up doing base 33, which probably only exists in Pete's brain. Base 36 is what some of the custom services do, which is all uppercase and the 10 digits. My issue with that is, have you ever gotten a serial number and go, is that a O or a 0? Do you have a question, Arnold?
Hey, by the way, Pete?
Yeah.
Jack note 3 lines up. The 39 should be a 29. Plus.
Oh. Gotcha. So my issue even with base 36 was, have you ever gotten a serial number or anything and go, is that a 0 or an O? Is that a 1, an I, or an L? Depending on the font, those get very confusing. I know we've all dealt with that. So what I did was I said, you know what? I'm going to eliminate that as an issue. So I removed 0, 1, and the letter I from my base, so that anytime I see an O or a 0, I know it's really an O because 0 doesn't exist in my world. Same thing, they can give me a 1, an I, or an L. I know it's an L because 1s and I's don't exist in my world. So now I don't have to deal with, different fonts make characters look a little different. So that's the reason I'm using base 33.
But you'll keep the little O though, right?
No, I'm not using any lowercase at all. Remember, I'm using base 33, which is all uppercase.
All upper and got it.
The digits.
Okay. And get rid of those numbers. 1,
right.
I,
0, 1, and I is what I got rid of. So that gives me base 33. Now that decreased my pool just a little bit, but still, remember, it's an exponential pool, and I'm allowing up to 10 characters for my short code, and I've actually got that number in here somewhere.
Hey, you know what I'm going to do, Pete?
Yep.
I'm going to do all lowercase and the numbers.
There you go.
Yeah, just to be different than you.
So I'm allowing 10 characters, base 33 is what I'm doing. That's how many surveys I can send before I run out of 10 characters. At that point, I'll be okay. I'll be on that 60-foot yacht, and I'll pay somebody else to handle the coding change to allow for an 11th character. So
So
yeah, that's what really makes this so powerful is the exponential piece of it. You know, for every character, it just gets so exponentially larger. So the last thing I did, and as soon as I show you this, then I promise we'll look at the code. Is this is base 62? Like I said, this is base 36. And then what I wound up doing, the last thing I did was I jumbled mine up. Yeah, I removed 0, 1, and I. And then I jumbled mine up just so that the shortcodes generated were a little more random, so they didn't go sequentially quite so smoothly. Just so that I sent two people back-to-back surveys, they wouldn't, the two codes wouldn't look like they were 1 and 2. So I jumbled up the letters, and that is the base 33 that I'm using. And you can use whatever string you want as long as your decode and your encode string are the same, and however many characters are in this string is your base. So I mean, you can come up with whatever base you want as long as you have that many unique characters in your string and you have that same string in your encode and decode logic. You can convert from any base to any base.
I guess you can create a formula like a seed and then have it jumble it the way you want it.
Right. Yeah. What you would really do if you're really concerned about jumbling is instead of using an auto inc ID, you would use a hash to generate your initial ID number so that you always had a unique number. And that's what the URL shorteners are actually doing. They're not using a sequential ID, they're using a numeric hash.
Got it.
So now I've explained all the concepts behind it, which takes much longer than actually just looking at the code. The code is about as easy as you could get. So like I said, we've got two procedures. The first one is the encode procedure. This is what takes 17230 and converts it to base 33 for me. Like I said, I removed the I, the 0, and the 1. There's my base. There's my base number. And notice I did these as strings. So, if I decided to go to a different base, I can actually just replace these two lines. If I wanted to do a base 62, all I'd have to do is change these two lines and I could do base 62. So all we do is this is that exact same math that we talked about. Whatever our end number is, which starts out as 17230, we take 17230 divided by our base and get the remainder. That's what the modulo function does. Then we just use the position, and there's our +1 that we kept doing to get our position. This is for Arnold. This is string slicing. You probably use the heck out of string slicing in Clarion. That's WebDev's method of string slicing. So this gets us that particular character out of our string, adds it to our URL. Now our number becomes whatever that integer part is. Remember how we did 277 on our, our second pass. We got 277, remainder of 56. Remainder is 56, and then our number becomes 277. We do another loop with 277, divide that by our base, on down, and what we're left with at the end is our short URL right there. Make sense? Everybody follow that?
I'm liking it.
Now, one trick is I didn't do this exactly following the rule either. If I put 62 in here and did that base 62 alphabet up there, I wouldn't get 4TU. I would get 4T, or I would get UT4. And the reason why is when you write it out, you flip it. And I didn't flip it. And again, it doesn't matter as long as your encode and decode follow the same rules, and you can encode and decode any number one way or the other. You're fine. But if you're wanting to write something that's compatible with another base 62 engine, what you should be doing instead of this line should really read like that, so that you're writing it backwards. Follow me?
Wait a minute. That plus, you mean ampersand? No.
No. Writing it this way, the first number we figured out when we went through this, first number we figured out was U, then T, then 4, but it gets wrote as 4TU. So you got to build your string backwards. You always got to stick the new character that you found on the front of the string, not on the back of the string.
Oh, gotcha. Got it.
But again, I didn't do that. It doesn't matter because I handled the flipping on my decode. And at the end of the day, unless you're communicating with someone else that's generating the codes, as long as you're the one encoding and decoding the codes, as long as your two formulas match, that's all that matters. So that is your encode logic that I'm using to do my encoding. Now we take the decoding logic. The decoding logic, we've got that same string, same base. Now what I'm doing here, forcing it to uppercase because I know I'm not supporting lowercase letters, so if they did a lowercase letter, it really should be an uppercase letter. And then this is that little trick I was telling you about. If they give me a 0, I know that there's no short code out there with 0 in it, so it had to have been an O that they thought was a 0. So I replace any zeros with O's. If they give me a 1, I don't have 1s, I don't have I's, so if they give me a 1, the only thing that could have possibly have been is an L. So I replace the 1s with L's, and the same thing with I's. I replace the I's with L's. So that's how I get away from dealing with font issues right there. And then we just follow into our math here. And this step -1 is that other half of my flipping. Like I said, instead of flipping on the encode, I flipped on the decode. If you change that line of code over on your encode, then you would not be stepping by -1 here. You would do it front to back instead of back to front. I'm doing it back to front because I didn't flip it on the other side. So again, all we do is we take we use the position function of WinDev to find out what position our character is in, and then we do the -1. So now we're doing this math that we talked about right down here. We're finding out, we're taking our 4 and saying what position is that? That's 5. Okay, 5 -1. So remainder is 5 -1. Once we, if there's a character that, if they put a symbol or something in there, well, then that's a bad URL. You should never process a character that's not part of your base alphabet. So So, if there's any characters not in your base alphabet, that's not a valid code. That's what this line's doing. So now our out number is again that math that we did, 4 times 62 plus 29. This is that same loop that we did right here. And then as long as we got a good reminder, a good number, we return the number. So this has taken 17230 and decoded it back to, or taken the short code and decoded it back to 17230. So those two functions are really the heart of this. The encoding and decoding your unique ID.
Well, I like this concept. That's
All
pretty
right.
cool.
So now the only thing left to do is actually get that to our short code, to our URL. So how do we do that? All right. Well, we come over to our index page, because obviously we're trying to go for the shortest possible URL we can give someone. So we don't want to send them to a specific page. We want them to just be able to type in the domain name. So if we just type in our domain name, the page we're going to go to is our index page. And this is an AWP page. And you'll see that almost every WebDev site I generate is like a hybrid. I generally have some front-end pieces that are AWP and back-end pieces that are WebDev dynamic. That's exactly what this is. This index page is an AWP page. And one of the parameters it takes, and it's an optional parameter because it's defined with a default value, which means it's an optional parameter, is that survey code. If I get a survey code in, then all I do is reach the survey request file by survey request ID with the decoded value of that survey code. So short code decoded to 17230, I pull up the survey request for 17230, and then I call my actual survey page, passing it the survey ID for 17230. So that's my lookup. If you were doing a traditional URL shortener, this page display would be an actual redirect to whatever the long URL you got out of your database was. Make sense? So at this point, I would be able to do that. But that's still not short enough. At this point, index is accepting a parameter, so I could give someone a link like that. But I want to make it even shorter and cleaner than that. I do two things to get me the final step. First thing I do is a feature that some folks may not know about. It's mainly used for SEO friendliness, and that is what's called URL rewriting. And if we come over here to page, URL rewriting, we'll see that I've got a rewrite rule on index. And if we look at it, what I do is on my index page, you can send it in as part of the URL. So index dash ID becomes, so what that rule is saying is that if you type in that URL, that rule right here translates it to that. And that's real good for SEO friendliness is what you really use this for. Say you've got a products page and you get, instead of my domain, geez, products slash or question mark category socks. You know, that's a pretty typical type of URL you would see. Google ignores this. Anything back here, they don't index. But if you use the URL shortener, then the URL rewriting, then you can do this. And now Google is going to index that, and they give weight to the name of the page. So since this page has the word socks in the name, you're going to rate higher when someone's searching for socks, and they're going to find that page. Google is going to send them to this page, and that URL rewriting engine rule right here is going to turn it into this so that your site displays your products page with the category of socks. So that's what that is really used for. And if you're doing e-commerce, those type of sites, you really need to study up and learn that. And I guarantee you Fabrice does a lot of stuff with that, because I know he does a lot of AWP sites. So that, for me, I'm using it just so that I can get down to a little cleaner code. So now we're at the point that I could give someone this link, you know, getting it shorter and shorter with each step. And this is as far as I can go with WebDev. Now I've got to go over to my web server engine for this last piece of the puzzle. Because remember, what we're really trying to do is get this. So how do we do that? Well, for me, I should have made this connection already. Sorry, guys. It's going to take just a second. I use Apache for all my web hosting. And Apache is, I can make the configuration files for Apache. So that's the world I live in and understand. So if we go over here to my vhost file for Apache, we scroll down here. Oh, actually, that's, let's see. Here's my vhost entries. And I had to add these 3 lines of code. Let me blow up that font. Wow, that seemed to take an exorbitant amount of time. I had to add these 3 lines of code to my Apache configuration file. And what they do is take this and rewrite it to that so that WebDev recognizes it and then can later rewrite it to that. And I could have had that rewrite engine in Apache take this and rewrite it as this, and I wouldn't have had to do that WebDev rewrite, but it was just a little easier to get the rewrite engine to write this versus this. So this is the Apache rules, and basically this rule turns on the rewrite engine. You know, if you don't turn it on, it won't do anything. This says ignore anything that ends with /teamology. Bonus points for whoever can guess why that is. And time's up. That is the short code that gets to the WebDev Dynamics site. If you type in teamology / if you go to www.teamology.com/teamology, you're launching into the WebDev Dynamics site. Your WebDev Dynamic always has whatever your project name as that short code to launch it. So I know that anything that ends with that is going into my dynamic side of the site. So I don't want to do any URL rewriting for that. So I skip that and make sure to ignore any of those. Then anything left, if it's calling the domain name, and you should recognize it. Did Bob join us this morning, or is he working this morning? I don't see him on the list. This is, if you guys aren't familiar, this is a regular expression. That's what all this is. And let me tell you, you can write entire programs in regular expressions. They're very complex. I'm not great with regular expressions. But what this regular expression is telling is doing is looking for anything that's calling just the domain name without any pages or anything in it. And if you're calling just the domain name, it takes whatever's behind, domain name / some characters and rewrites it into index - those characters. So it's taking that and rewriting as that. And now for just a little aside, like I said, I'm very good with Apache, very good with Apache configuration files, not good with regular expressions. I played with this for a couple of hours, could not get the expression just right. I fired up Odesk, hosted a job on Odesk. An hour later, and $75 later, a guy gave me the exact rewrite rule to post in here that made my Apache engine run. There's Odesk, Freelancer, a couple of those other services out there. For those little things like that, you can find someone out there that'll do it for, 40, 50, 75 bucks, and it really becomes what's your time worth very quickly. And it was well worth 75 bucks to get this done and out the door. Now, the next question Arnold's going to ask me, I'm ahead of Arnold today, is how do I do this piece for IIS? Why do you think I mentioned Odesk? Don't ask me. I can't do anything with IIS, but I guarantee you somebody on Odesk can help you out. And that's the whole piece. So again, what I'm doing is using it to redirect to a particular survey request, but you see all the bits and pieces that would make it a URL shortener very easy if you want to create a URL shortener service. So only thing I ask is if you take this and create the next URL shortener service that knocks Bitly off their throne, remember your good old Uncle Pete's the one that showed you how to do this. He just wants a 70-foot yacht. That's all he wants. He's not greedy.
60 to 70.
Yeah, I would settle for 60.
All right. Down the Mississippi River.
Any questions?
Any questions, anybody?
Anybody's head hurt? Well, if you could chop 40 feet, chop it in half there, Chris, and keep
Sure.
40 feet for yourself. Any of you Clarion guys that used to go to the conferences should remember the yacht that used to sit across from the hotel with the helicopter pad and stuff
Oh,
on
yeah,
it.
that was unreal.
Yeah, that yacht would work perfectly.
Hey, this is pretty cool. I like this. This is good use of technology.
Well,
And
like I said, once you understand what it does and how it works, can you believe that TinyURL and Bitly built businesses based on this? I mean, this is all Bitly did for years. They built a business doing nothing but this.
yeah, but how do they make money?
Well, Bitly has now turned it into branding and click tracking and all kinds of extra pieces. But for years, all they did was URL redirects.
Mm-hmm. That was a smart path. I like how you modified it though to eliminate the issues with the I and the one and the L.
Yeah, for us, because
And the zero.
again, the reason that we went down this path was because we're sending SMS messages that some of those people, they're not going to have a phone that they could click on that link in the SMS. They're going to have to take that and type that in somewhere. And we wanted to make damn sure that what they type in gets them where we want them to go.
So Brian had a comment. He says,
I see
"Girls
that.
like fellas with short URLs."
Does
Okay.
he know that from experience, or?
I don't know. He has a daughter, so she must have told him.
I see.
Yeah. Alrighty. So thank you for doing this. That was I love this topic. Now
Yeah,
I gotta go
it
figure.
was one of those things that when me and my partner discussed it, what I started out the day was I was supposed to research and decide which service we wanted to use, and at the end of the day, I had our own, and it was one of those things that once I got started on it, it was kind of fun. It's one of those fun projects that
Ah, you're a
you enjoy
programmer.
working on. Yeah, yeah, it was creating this kind of technology and understanding how it works is fun and what makes our brains work. So it was enjoyable to work on. It was it wasn't writing the 100th customer update form of my career.
Exactly. Okay, we got a good showing.
Yeah.
People already started leaving, so we'll look forward to seeing you again in a couple weeks or so. And I don't see any other questions, so unless Fabrice has something to say. See, good job, good job, good job.
All right.
Yeah, sorry I got up so late, but man, I just couldn't get up.
Well, do we do we
My
have
buzzer hit
someone
me
for
at
next week?
5, but um, right now nothing. But
All right.
we'll
Well,
see what.
come on, guys. Somebody step up.
Step up. Let Tim or I know.
Yeah, definitely step up and share something. I guarantee you, everyone to watch today has something in one of their projects that would be a benefit to the rest of us.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I really liked about what you did is you showed how you could customize it to your own, 33-bit type of thing,
Right.
um, and jumble it up the way you feel like it and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. That's the advantage of doing your own versus using someone else's.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's
All right.
call it a day. Okay,
Great.
have a great
Thanks,
weekend,
guys.
Pete. Excellent, and I hope you, I hope you get your 60+ foot yacht. You
All right.
deserve it.
I
Okay,
appreciate it, man.
take care.
Yep.
Bye now.